Hi everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I'm coming to you from Tiohtià:ke, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. I have my four shirt on. This was the when I was in Norway in Oslo. I guess it's almost 2 weeks ago now. This is a new political party that was set up in Norway in response to the former Left Party um, going along with the NATO proxy war. So it's an anti-NATO party, and I did an event there with Aaron Mate, Glenn Deason, and a couple others. I guess it's almost 2 weeks ago now. And it was actually quite a successful event. Anyways, this political party is causing some ripples in Norway. Um, so there's lots of developments in Canadian foreign policy. I have both the kids, so I'm gonna hopefully they won't enter the room, but the young one might. So I guess yeah, just to start, get right to it. There's Le Devoir had a piece about how Carney's government's open to exploitation of petroleum oil in off the coast of this 85,000 kilometer square area in Newfoundland and Labrador that they're open to exploration on. So they continue with this more pro tar sands than even Trudeau was, who of course was much more pro tar sands than and more pro, should I say, more pro oil than is widely discussed. Anita Anand this week met with her French counterpart, and she said, "Thank you, Minister Barrot, for a productive conversation today. Canada and France share a long-standing partnership rooted in history, culture, and shared values." And I've seen lots of it. I talk about this in my book on history of Canada, Haiti, that I haven't published, but it's mostly done. Uh, there's many instances where Canadian officials talk about the shared values, but you'll basically never, well, one time Bob Ray recently sort of suggested it. They basically never talk about uh, the ransom of independence that was forced on Haiti uh, from France, made the former enslaved pay their pay for their liberation after winning it in war under the threat of a reinvasion. That's the shared values that we have with France. The Globe has a piece. Erwin Kotler is campaigning to have Jimmy Lai, who's this Hong Kong, very anti-China media billionaire, uh, get him Canadian citizenship. And this is it's just so remarkable seeing Erwin Kotler on all these things and just how much this guy is a human rights activist in service of U.S. empire. Um, on Thursday, I was in Ottawa, and I'll get to more of this later on. I was in Ottawa and I saw Jenny Kwan, the NDP MP, who's a real China hawk. I saw her leaving Parliament. So I asked her about her thoughts on the World Bank saying that China had brought 800 million people out of poverty. That's about 3 years ago now. And her reaction was quite interesting. I haven't shared the video yet. She just basically denied it. She said, I hadn't heard this. This is, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I said, well, assuming it's true, what's your opinion? I can't just assume it's true. And then I asked her if she was a China hawk, and then she went into this whole thing about foreign interference, and I prodded a bit on foreign interference, and then she gets into, it's not just China for foreign interference. I also talked about Iran and India, and I was like, well, how about U.S. and Israeli interference? And she didn't really have much to say about that. But that's remarkable. Somebody who in the NDP, member of parliament for 10, 15 years, I don't know exactly how long, who's supposedly is, quite interested in China, and she hasn't heard that China had the greatest success maybe in the history of humanity of taking people out of extreme poverty, that the World Bank said that 800 million people over 40 years were brought out of $1.90 a day is their thing of extreme poverty. This is like the greatest success of poverty alleviation in the history of humanity. And Jenny Kwan doesn't know that. She has not come across that, which just tells you, so much about Jenny Kwan's politics, but it obviously also tells you so much about the media environment, the broader political culture. You can criticize China for being repressive. You can criticize China for, you know, environmental issues. You can all kinds of reasons to criticize the Chinese government, but I mean, this is the World Bank. This is not, some sort of I don't know, lefty outlet or and yet she's just doesn't know this like monumental fact. And then when you ask her about it, she basically denies it exists. Uh, and of course, it's kind of ironic because the reason why Jenny Kwan's all whipped up about foreign interference is precisely because the statistic is true. They're whipping up the foreign interference around China because it's been successful, because the country has grown in power drastically over the past 25, 30 years, which part of course, is, getting 800 million people out of extreme poverty and having quite a successful economic reform, revolution, if you like, whatever. The Globe published this big piece by Mark McKinnon titled "Mapping the Modern Day Gulag: Canadian-backed effort tracks Ukrainian children," and uh, and it's all about this Canadian-funded technology of sorry, and so it's all about this. It's all about the Ukrainian children that have been taken by Russia and really whipping this up. And this Canadian technology that's mapping what they're calling the modern day gulag, which is, I mean, I know this is how the International Criminal Court has gone at Putin and stuff like that. This whole issue's never made any sense to me. This notion that Russia's stealing Ukrainian children as part of some sort of like plot to wipe out Ukrainians or culturally, it just makes no sense. I mean, if you think of the historic connections, this is not in any sense equivalent to Canada, uh, residential schools of destroying the language and the culture of indigenous. It's just it's not analogous. And and so Canada's been funding this initiative, and apparently the group that's behind this initiative of mapping out which is of course the even today I was listening to some of what the negotiations taking place in Istanbul, the Russian-Ukrainian negotiations, and the Ukrainians are really playing up the children question, and it's part of this playing to the heartstrings of the brutal Russians and this and in the Glow piece they even suggest that this is a demographic issue for Russia. So it's like they're trying to get young people because they have demographic problems with not enough children and whatnot. It just doesn't make sense on its face. And the Canadian government's right at the center of this whole kind of hype story. And the Globe did this big expose front page about Canada's role in funding all of this. And the group that's doing it, Halal Systems, They were also involved in Syria, and they made this open source technology they developed an app that would track the taking off of and trajectory of Syrian government warplanes, and then they apparently would provide warnings of this. So it's this NGO, this group that's very much aligned with Western geopolitics that's doing this whole mapping thing in Ukraine. There's a story, a company I don't think I've come across. It's called Top Aces, and it's 25th anniversary, and it's this military training firm, and it says it's recorded over 140,000 accident-free training hours in support of NATO and allied nations. And in this press release, it said in 2021, Top Aces achieved a historic milestone by becoming the first private company in the world to own and operate a fleet of F-16 fighter aircraft. And so I guess they own a whole fleet of F-16s to do training, and I mean, this is obviously their press release, but they've apparently been quite successful in their training of military pilots. And again, I hadn't even heard of this firm. I knew that CAE and in Montreal, this Montreal firm, Montreal is this real hub of aerospace, and CAE, of course, is the biggest pilot training firm in the world. Trains all over, huge operations in the U.S., but then in the Middle East and everywhere, Europe, etc. And this is another Canadian firm operating in this domain. The Globe had a piece front page about NATO's 5%. Now it's for 5% GDP. This seems to be fully what's happening here. The plan is some sort of 3%. The head of NATO has sent a letter to all the countries, members, and it's some sort of plan of 3.5% of kind of official military spending, and then another 1.5% in things that are sort of associated to the military. I don't fully understand the breakdown. I don't know if that's been completely elaborated at this point, but this is what the push at the end of June in the NATO summit is gonna happen. And we're just seeing this play out all over with the officials and the media fully. Now they're moving that next step from pushing this increased military spending, and now that number is just getting higher and higher, of course. But now they're starting to talk about, as the Globe editorial had it, I think it was on Friday, the high cost of failing to pay for peace. Oh yeah, that was the title of the editorial board editorial, and in it says that promise avoids hard choices and an opportunity to assemble the funds needed for a rebuilding of Canada's defenses. The old age security payment, which sends funds to households of hundreds of thousands annual income, is ripe for reform. So too is the equalization program. Expanding pharmacare to displace private insurance coverage is simply a waste of money. So they are now, the Globe editorial is explicitly saying we're going to go after the OAS, old age security, the equalization program, interprovincial equalization, and really aggressive that the whole pharmacare, we can't have any expanded social entitlements in the context of putting more into the war. And the defense minister at the CANSEC forum on Tuesday, I think it was, he said that he's basically sort of celebrating like what has to be done. He says Netherlands let 22% of their public servants go, except the Defense Department, to meet their obligations. He then mentions other countries are doing away with national holidays. Others are increasing corporate taxes or running larger deficits. This is the Canada's defense minister citing that Denmark got rid of a holiday apparently to increase military spending, citing the fact that Netherlands has let go 22% of its federal bureaucracy, minus the military, to find new resources to put into the warfare economy. So we're really getting to this point where they're now hard on the military increases. Now, at the CANSEC forum, apparently Melanie Joly and another who's now industry minister, I believe, and another minister apparently evaded journalists. They didn't want to answer any of these questions. I guess some journalists wanted to ask about like how you're actually going to get this 5% or 3.5% of GDP plus 1.5 extra. And apparently Jolie fled, and then later that day she was available for questions on a different subject. So the speculation here is that there's still the Carney government's still in this phrase, we're going to massively increase military spending, but they understand that they don't know how to do this exactly with regards to cutting other programs. When I was in Ottawa on Thursday, I also saw Don Davies, who's the interim leader of the NDP, and I asked him if NATO says we got to go to 5% or 3.5% plus 1.5, uh, is it, are you going to start calling for Canada to NATO? Because if we have to cut a whole bunch of social programs to do our NATO duty, pull our weight in NATO, are we going to just finally, the NDP going to finally say, okay, well, that's not worth it, right? And he wouldn't go there. He wouldn't answer that. But he did say his statement I thought was pretty good. Otherwise, where he said that he didn't really see how we get to 2%. He thought the 2% was a arbitrary number, and that no one's offering the plan on how to get to 2%, what needs to be cut to get to the 2%. So in the context of the NDP, it was a pretty good response that he gave me. You can see it. I've already posted that one to my social media. Um, Now at the CanSec forum, Mike Pompeo, who was the Trump's first Secretary of State, he uh, he said that Canada paying 61 billion to join the Golden Dome was a good deal. And Trump this week, I'm not sure what day, on Thursday or Friday, I believe, he tweeted out, or he whatever, Truth Social, posted to Truth Social. I told Canada, which very much wants to be part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. So Trump's offering participation in the Golden Dome in exchange for annexation, which is, I mean, like, we don't need to participate. This is just all part of U.S. efforts to dominate the world militarily. It weaponizes space. It heightens arms race. And and the fact that Carney has suggested that we're interested is outrageous. Um, and like Trump, I think Trump intervening in this way probably makes it harder for Carney to keep down this path of joining the Golden Dome. We'll see. Uh, it is, again, it's amazing how Carney did all this rhetoric about breaking away from the U.S. and but yet aligns with the Golden Dome plan. Carney did say this week, though, on with David Cochrane in Power and Politics, he said 75 cents of every dollar of capital spending for defense goes to the United States. Canadian capital spending on defense. I don't know if that's a is correct, but I assume it's close to correct. And obviously that's outrageous. And any business about breaking from the U.S. has to confront that question. But one of the, I think it was a Bloomberg story, um, was pointing out again that this business of joining the Golden Dome is a huge sop to Washington in the context of saying you're backing away. Shifting gears, the Crown Prince of Iran is in Toronto for a speech put on by this fanatic Zionist group, Tafsik, and the National Post had this big interview with him about about his plans and sort of an effort to return the monarchy to Iran. There's another story about this week from one of the U.S. funded Iranian media outlets, English language media outlets, about how the talk of restarting diplomatic relations that the Iranians are asking for changes in Canada, but the Canadian response is that Iran must undergo, quote, significant changes to its behavior both domestically and internationally before diplomatic ties can be restarted. It's still, I mean, the Trudeau government promised that back in before being elected in 2015. And here we are now, 13 years later. Canada has no diplomatic relations with Iran. And it doesn't look like that's on the horizon whatsoever, which of course serves Israel. It serves the most belligerent factions in the U.S. and and you know, when you contrast it to having relations with this country committing a Holocaust in Gaza, that's, you know, bombed Syria however many hundreds of times in the last couple of months, has bombed Lebanon, endlessly bombed Yemen, bombed Iraq. Obviously, a huge double standard there. Now, the CBC had a piece about headline Israel's provocative settlement response may force Canada to back up its words. Two experts say Canada must either sanction Israel or lose credibility. And what we've seen so far, the government in Israel announces huge expansion of settlements, 22, all of course war crimes. And alongside this huge expansion of settlements in West Bank, they announced explicitly, Katz, the foreign minister, announced that this was designed to subvert the possibility of a Palestinian state. So, like, completely openly, aggressively saying this two-state solution business is out the window. And the aim of our expansion and settlements is not just to steal land, but is you know, with the political objective. Uh, Canada so far has urged Israel to scrap its West Bank settlement plan. The sanctions business that we had with the UK, France, Canada, I think it was on May 19th, now 2 weeks ago. We're not seeing anything moving forward here. And that CBC article, you know, it's this notion of sanction is kind of ridiculous, right? Because it's really just a question of upholding Canadian law, right? Pursue Canadians fighting in the Israeli military under the Crimes Against Humanity Act. Pursue institutions recruiting, inducing under the Foreign Enlistment Act. Uphold Canadian law, Export-Import Act on arms shipments to countries violating human rights. Uh, Uphold the law on the Canada Revenue Agency and all these groups assisting the Israeli military, West Bank settlements, racist organizations, municipalities, all contravene current CRA rules on registered charities. So uphold all that. Stop the repression against those opposing genocide. I mean, these are all simple things. This is not the question of sanctioning Israeli officials. Uphold Canadian law. Treat Israel like you do a pro-US ally like Colombia before Petro, rather than this exceptional case, this unique exceptionalism, legal exceptionalism for Israel and other exceptionalism for Israel, where you'll have a Canadian ambassador who will host a pizza party for Canadians fighting in the Israeli military. This is what we need to do. And I mean, obviously sanction, you know, somewhere down the line, if Israel doesn't, if upholding Canadian law doesn't do the trick, then you got to, you know, move forward. But in the here and now, it's just a question of upholding Canadian law. And the Maple this week published a story headlined "Government Export Agency Noted 99 Israeli Crimes, but okayed arms sales." So they noted 99 different, you know, they know Israel's committing all these massive violations of human rights, and they just continue forward. Crown Corporation, Canadian Commercial Corporation, continue forward, ignoring Canadian law on human rights violating countries and arms exports, and just move forward. On the media front, the editor in chief, the head of the National Post, Rob Roberts, he's in Israel. I mean, might be back now, but he was in Israel on this trip paid for, organized by the Exigent Foundation, which is headed up by this pro-Israel uh, uh, wealthy person, capitalist. And one of the co-founders, the Vivian Berkowitz or whatever, the former Canadian ambassador, Harper's ambassador, total fanatic. Uh, she was one of the co-founders of Black Hue, and so that's a national post. And a bunch of other media have a whole bunch of journalists have been taken on these previous delegation to Israel, organized by the same group. In the Globe, that Marsden, who frames herself as a sort of liberal, she's in Vancouver. I think she might even live in East Vancouver. Uh, uh, Frames herself as a liberal, but she's raving Jewish supremacist. She has a piece titled "Media Errors Can Have Big Repercussions," and she talks about this uh, this report, I guess, that appeared on BBC that said there was going to be like 14,000 Palestinian babies that were going to die in 48 hours if aid wasn't brought in. And ultimately, the story didn't really make sense on its surface. I mean, that timeline, 48 hours, that number, 14,000, it apparently ends up being an error. I don't know exactly where the error comes. I believe it was 14,000, but over a longer period was the proper statistic. And then she takes this error that there the one time there's an error in, let's say, in favor of the Palestinians, and then she whips it into a whole big thing about how this type of error is why those Israeli diplomats were killed in Washington D.C. And it's like could you imagine considering yourself a liberal and being you know writing about like the bias, essentially the bias media bias in Canada against Israel. I mean, like seriously, like there, it's just so comical. You don't even know like how would you even have an argument or discussion with this person? Just like you're literally living on another planet. I mean, like all the post media is like it's just so fanatically. It's not they don't there's not even a pretense. They like go on pro-Israel lobbying. The head of the National Post goes on pro-Israel lobbying. Other post media journalists go on these lobbies. And the CBC is like, okay, it's not quite as openly fanatical. But you got like the Torstar Robert Pritchard, longtime head of Torstar, is also on the board. He's or the director of Reisman and Schwartz's Hessig Foundation. Paul Godfrey, the head of, until recently, the founder and head of Post Media, is on the board of Avi Ben Lolo's, or is the chair of Avi Ben Lolo's Abraham Global Initiative. Um, so it's just totally fanatic. Now, this week, I spoke at this forum on Saturday on Palestine, and it was a forum on the media, and Martin Lukash from The Breach was the other. Ihab Latoyev was the sort of moderator, kind of back and forth, but we were the two speakers. And I kind of I started off with this story about this Michael Cooper, this conservative MP, and who told me when I was in Ottawa on Thursday that I said if Amnesty calls it live stream genocide, and he said I stand with Israel. And I said you stand with Israel even if they kill everyone in Gaza, even if they ethnically cleanse everyone, starvation policy, and then he repeats I stand with Israel. And it's got like on my social media, it's like 1 million people have watched it. It's been picked up by a bunch of places. At least a 500,000 more have watched it in other forums. No Canadian media, of course, interested. And I started off from that. And I'm like, Michael Cooper is just basically an average Israeli Jew. His attitudes are just the average Israeli Jewish person, where like 47% of Israeli Jews want to kill everyone in Gaza, and 82% want to ethnically cleanse. And then I talk and I say, well, the attitudes in the Canadian Jewish community are probably not quite as bad as the Israeli Jewish community, but we know from the walk with Israel that they are, not that much different. And then I talked about how to tie it to the media that Paul Godfrey's son, was the chair of the Walk for Israel. So the founder of Post Media, the biggest media conglomerate in the country, his son was the chair of the Walk for Israel. And like I mentioned, Paul Godfrey himself is and Martin Lucas got really offended in his right off the hop in responding after I talked about the media, and he's like basically the notion that there's an ethnic component to how the media bias against Palestinians is just outrageous. And he just sort of he was quite he brings it up again later on. And I didn't even state it explicitly like that. I said it a much more indirect way. And he's like, the Thompson family, who are WASPs, owners of the Globe and Mail, that they have pro-Israel in their papers, and and sort of saying, and I mean, we know that the Asper family, when they bought up Can West and they created the Can West, which then gets expanded by Paul Godfrey into Post Media. It's just completely well documented that Aspers, who were Jewish pro-Zionist, just inserted this really aggressive anti-Palestinian policy from the top. They pushed out one of the Montreal Gazette editors, or a publisher, resigns in response to it. It creates huge media controversy. So it's totally well documented. The Aspers purchased most of Canada's major daily papers, and then, they were already pro-Israel and just took it to a whole new step. Paul Godfrey was on the board of Can West going back to 2004. Then he's appointed CEO of National Post, and then he oversees this kind of odd, sort of consolidation media thing that Can West turns into Post Media, but it's expanded kind of dynamic. And so, the idea that the Jewish element is like irrelevant is ridiculous. It's also ridiculous at the Globe Mail. Like, as I mentioned in a recent article, that Marston and the other woman, I'm blanking on her name, a younger woman, often on a Saturday, two of the three op-eds are these two Jewish commentators who are both very upfront and aggressive about their Jewishness, and also quite aggressive about their Zionism. And the notion that someone like Levitt, in the National Post, the Financial Post columnist, who's supposed to be writing about, he's a corporate law person. He's a column for however many years around like labor law kind of, and sort of for corporation. And he spent last year and a half, he's calmed down a little now, but literally every column for a year was all basically just pro-genocidal fanaticism. The notion that ethnicity or religion has nothing to do with this it's crazy. I agree that it's not, the media is a reflection, the dominant media is a reflection of power sources at large, right? Like the Canadian media is not like sympathetic to the plight of the those disenfranchised in the slums of Port-au-Prince. They follow the perspective of Ottawa vis-a-vis Haiti. They follow the perspective of Ottawa vis-a-vis Venezuela. They follow, like there's China, wherever they follow it, on domestic issues. They reflect power, and on foreign policy, it's on a whole different scale of bias, and the range of debate is even that much more narrow. And so the U.S. empire shapes Canadian media discussion on all international issues, of course, of course. And so any notion that it's just a question of Jewish Zionist influence is completely erroneous, of course. But the notion that it's like irrelevant is also like, and what I find interesting about, I mean, as I talked about in this talk, I went into it like, we got to get into all sides of it. Like, you talk about Honest Reporting Canada as this FLAC organization, uh, forcing the media or pressuring the media into alignment with an anti-Palestinian agenda, and that it does play a role, but it's part of a whole ideological structure, right? I talked about the Montreal Holocaust Museum, but all the whole IHRA, the Special Envoy on Anti-Semitism. This is decades and decades of creating the whole, Holocaust industry, as Finkelstein describes it. This is decades and decades of creating a ideological, cultural apparatus that has this impact of enforcing on the media or disciplining the media in towards an anti-Palestinian agenda. And obviously, Jewish Zionist groups and Jewish Zionist individuals like an Erwin Kotler in establishing the special envoy position, obviously they've played like a very important role in all of that process. And I find it I find it like kind of like remarkable that amidst the Holocaust in Gaza, that someone like Martin, who in his speech talks about how he did the birthright trip to Israel in 2004, right? He talks about how he goes on to work with what's the Palestinian forgetting the group that used to bring that brought the woman that was killed in from Washington State there. Anyways, the Palestinian a solidarity movement, and 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 so he talks about going there. But I just find it remarkable that like to me, what Martin's doing there is very clearly trying to exculpate, right? And it's just like this process of trying to like, oh, like don't bring any pressure to bear on the Jewish Zionist groups. Don't bring any pressure to bear on those who are coming at this from a uh, ethno religious angle. And yeah, I just find it kind of remarkable. I mean, he's wrong. Like I think like empirically he's wrong. Uh, um, and morally, it's like, I don't think the equivalent is not to be like some sort of like, I guess the equivalent would be like, some level the equivalent would be like, Canadians who are like who try to exculpate uh so it's just kind of all Washington, right? We just do bad things in the world because of Washington. I guess that would be kind of sort of, the sort of left nationalists have done that uh, historically. But yeah, so it's empirically wrong. And quite honestly, there's no willingness to actually delve into the facts on the matter, right? That's the other part. If you delve into the facts, of course, then you'd just be accused of being anti-Semitic. And so he's not actually, up on it. And in the case of like the breach, I mean, like 4 years ago, Martin decided that I can't write for the breach on any issue because he basically labeled me an anti-Semite. And the whole like uh sort of there's all kinds of other politics go behind it. Like, he's somebody who's argued that, Zionism's not about Jewish supremacy, it's about white supremacy. And it's like, well, yeah, but dude, man, you can emigrate there tomorrow, but I can't. So it obviously it's not just about white supremacy. Like, obviously, yes, it's a European colonial, but it clearly it's based upon Jewish supremacy. That's how the um status of people is based upon it, right? Any Jew anywhere in the world can become a citizen tomorrow on those grounds. They have all these laws, right? Obviously, what they're trying to do in Gaza is just drive out non-Jews. They want to populate the place with Jewish people. I mean, I find that remarkable that someone on the left, amidst all of the horrors, would still be sticking to this really strong and like kind of morally righteous position, which basically is saying like don't look at all the Montreal organizations that are raising money for Israel, that are lobbying for Israel. Don't look at any of them. That's not important. It's just all about geopolitics, empire. It's just all kind of operating at a completely abstract level. Is essentially the argument being made. I've gone on already too long, and I have a couple more things I want to get into. Interesting development on the Stephen Lewis front. Avi Lewis put out a message about how his dad has has been going to these anti-genocide protests. Showed a picture of him, no to genocide, and talking just a little bit about like how he's come to this. Now, the first thing I'll say on this is that obviously apparently Stephen Lewis, I know a few years ago there was reports on this. He got quite ill and looked like he was about to die. Avi talks about that, and somehow he's like he was supposed to have like 3 months or 6 months to live or something, and it's like that's we're now like 5, 6, or 7 years later, quite a while later. So obviously, anyone who's been through that, anyone who's 87 who's going out to rallies, you have to applaud, and you have to applaud anyone who's changed their position also on this. And now, having said that, I think some of what's in Avi's post, which got a lot of circulation, is a little bit dangerous kind of framing. And he said when he was Canada's ambassador to the UN from 1984 to 88, Dad was truly shocked by the regularity of open vitriolic anti-Semitism in the cocktail parties and ambassadorial receptions that surround that crucial but flawed institution. For this reason, among others, he's always been one in our family with the deepest atavistic fear of anti-Semitism. He was sympathetic to the idea of Israel as refuge longer than the rest. Okay, Stephen Lewis was aggressive Zionist before he became UN ambassador. His dad was a very aggressive Zionist. Uh, I've quoted stuff going back to the 70s. This is the idea that he, went to the UN and there were some anti-Semitic comments made when he was at cocktail parties. That is central to his Zionism. Is sorry, that ain't true. That ain't true. And it's a way of I think trying to uh, let him off the hook for decades and decades. And I have to say, it's not just like way in the past, right? After the Security Council, I wrote about this when Canada lost Security Council bid. He came out and he was really aggressive about how Palestine played no role in Canada losing of the Security Council. And I wrote a story, but people can check it out. It fit with other things he said that are deeply anti-Palestinian. So this is only I guess that was 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that on that one. So it's not just way in the past. He's been, and his sister is very aggressively. She was the one that sabotaged the central sabotaging the Palestine resolution in 2021 or 2018 at the NDP convention. So there's a bit of distortion going on there by Avi, but nonetheless, I think it is important that these are Stephen Lewis and Michelle Landsberg are this power couple on the left, and Stephen Lewis specifically has all kinds of mainstream corporate media kind of place. So it is a development that's of some note. Um, the I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about this protest, which I think it was on Tuesday, maybe last week, in front of the synagogue here in Montreal. And I'll start out with Mayor Levy of Hampstead. He said, tonight in Montreal, a pack of pro-Hamas fanatics showed up to scream at Jews outside a synagogue, proof that their movement is fueled by cowardice and hate, not justice. These degenerates didn't come to protest, they came to intimidate, and they failed miserably. The police penned them in like the unruly animals they've chosen to become, and that's exactly where they belong. Okay, so calling us animals. There was about 60 or 70 people there. CJA referred to it as pro-terror mobs, escalated their hatred this evening in Montreal by targeting the Chevra Kadisha synagogue. Nothing can excuse this open attack on Canadian values. Polyev, he talked in his caucus, he talked about rampaging anti-Semitic riots. Now, what was happening at the synagogue was a fundraiser for aid to disabled veterans of Israel Canada. Which is a registered charity, which is basically Rick Hillier was there, the former chief of the defense staff, the Canadian military. I really wanted to see, like, to ask him some questions. I wasn't able to do that. I was able to find the head of the Federation CJA, the biggest Jewish organization in Montreal, which is a sponsor of CJA, and I was able to ask him some questions, and I pulled it off despite he had two like private security thugs with him. I had my 3-year-old and my daughter. I was able to pull it off. I was pretty happy with myself pulling it off with carrying a child. But so yeah, so here's amidst the Holocaust, there's a fundraiser for an organization that basically takes on the function of of providing care to Israeli soldiers who have been injured. So basically takes on the function of what the Israeli state or Israeli military would have, Veterans Affairs would have to do. And it's protested, and the framing is of course that. And I had this one guy who came over uh, complained to us and is outside because there was a lot of people going in. It's correct. People that were going in were being they were being denounced. I had someone chuck water at me. I just asked her, "Are you going to the genocide event or something like that?" And she chucked water at me. Uh, um, and and I had this one guy who came out who was complaining, was like, I was just at the synagogue. I have nothing to do with the event, and like, you basically you're targeting me." And I was like, just like, dude, man, like if you don't want your synagogue to be used, don't be protested, then go to your synagogue and tell them to not have Israeli military fundraisers. And it was kind of interesting to see the guy's reaction. This guy was clearly, or he seemed to be, either he was putting on a show, but he seemed to be a bit more of a liberal kind of Zionist sort of, and he seemed to be a little bit, taken by that argument, which is obviously the case. If you don't want protests at Jewish organizations, stop having Jewish organizations promoting a Holocaust. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And the people who should be doing that are, of course, the people who are members of those organizations. But in practice, they don't. They cow, even those who are not on board necessarily with everything Israel's doing, or very uncomfortable by it, or even opposed to it. They tend to buckle and not push back. The Toronto bubble zone was the story came out about how the lawyers said it likely infringes on the charter. I saw when I was in Ottawa on Thursday, I challenged Olivia Chow, the Toronto mayor who voted for the bubble zone. I'm going to release that video at some point. Uh, Andrea Horvath, the mayor of Hamilton, uh, she gave $2,500 for the JNF fundraiser in Ottawa. Outrageous, outrageous. Jewish National Fund lost its charter with us. Also, the minister from the CAT government participated in the JNF fundraiser here in Montreal. Um, Dahlia Kurtz, I wrote a story about this. Dahlia Kurtz, her bid to go at my lawyer, and her bid to go at through the Bar Association of Quebec, Barreau du Québec. They threw it out, going after Phil Pott for breach of his lawyerly duties by criticizing her. And same thing with the Senate Ethics Commission. She went at the Senate Ethics Commissioner around Senator Wu defending me, and they also threw that out. So that's two little blows to Kurtz. Um, I saw Stephen Guilbeault in Ottawa, and I asked him about the Canadians fighting in the Israeli military and whether we should investigate in the War Crimes, Crimes Against Humanity Act, and the institutions inducing Canadians to join the military around the Foreign Enlistment Act. And so I asked him this, and I kind of walked with him, and he's just silent. I'm walking with him and his assistant, and he's going into some other parliamentary building. And then about like 40 seconds into it, he stops and he asks his assistant, take a photo of him. He's being charged for harassment. So here I am asking him about upholding Canada's law around war crimes against crimes of humanity and foreign enlistment, about those, killing in Gaza. And Guilbeault, this former purported activist, his response was to say, hey, Eve is accused of harassment for having responded to a social media influencer's posts. Take a photo of him, and we're going to like use this as evidence against him as he's asking questions. I mean, like, what an embarrassment. I put this on social media, and it didn't get as much circulation as some of the other videos. But I honestly, in some ways, I feel like this is like the most encapsulates just the bankruptcy of the Liberal Party, and specifically Guilbeault, where it's like, even if I really had harassed, or even if you believe I harassed Dahlia Kurtz, the importance of that compared to Canadians involved in the genocide in Gaza is so inconsequential. It's not even. And what is this guy concerned about? That's what he's going to talk about. Labor for Palestine. The Maple today is a story about Labor for Palestine's call on this the Canadian Labor Congress to make products from Israel hot, meaning that union members wouldn't process or wouldn't ship or deal with the products. It's a good call. I think it's very far-fetched as a realistic development, but there is some history to that. Couple little things. People's Forum. I'm going to be speaking at the People's Forum at the G7 summit in 2 weeks in Calgary. I'm gonna go to that. And the Saturday and Sunday, there's a protest on the Sunday, People's Forum on the Saturday. There was the CanSec summit, and it was pretty good protest. It seemed like hundreds of people. I think some people on were there. And I think I'll leave it at that. So there is opposition to. There's a bunch of protests on Palestine in Toronto. The Casa Loma protest that got a huge pushback. One here in Montreal, but so lots of action still taking place in Palestine. And the CanSec was 7 in the morning, and they did block it. I believe like a dozen people were arrested. I don't know where things are at with those who were detained. But they did disrupt it for quite a while, my understanding. And yeah, I'll open it up to comments and questions, and I will try to make Laura a co-host, and I'll let you go ahead. Go ahead, John. I see John's hand. Go ahead, John. Now,
Yeah, thanks, Eve. It took me a bit to straighten out the buttons. Uh, I'm observing the thumbs up if you can hear me, because Golden Dome, which in the context of Trump makes me think of golden showers, but that's a different thing. Uh, and Carney has signaled sympathy for the idea, and I've seen commentary saying, "Well, it's $1 trillion boondoggle; it's never going to happen." And Carney's just playing some kind of game. But there's a principled thing here at stake that seems to have elided Carney completely, which is that Canada's got a pretty long history of not accepting missiles and missile defense. And am I mistaken in thinking that this is symbolically and on a principle basis a pretty big deal, even if, and I agree with this, it's never actually going to happen?
I totally agree with you. I mean, it's a violation of Canada's um, obligations under the Outer Space Treaty and UN resolution. So yeah, I agree with you. I'd say that's decades goes back decades. Lots of anti-war activism on that going back to Reagan, and I also think it's just a breaking a promise around his stuff's an election about distancing from the U.S. and the U.S. military.
Yeah,
So,
you think? Yeah.
so all of it, and also it's gonna just exacerbate conflict with China, Russia, and others. It's no, I don't see it's on all kinds of
I don't
different
see,
fronts.
yeah, I don't see an upside to it, really. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Go ahead, Clara.
Yes, I agree that the Golden Dome really won't work for a big country like Canada. Um, it's I think the military has proven that it's really very difficult, and they are saying that probably for intelligence and computers and things like that are much more serious security uh, problem than missiles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is not the U.S. is not on the cusp of being attacked with long-range missiles because every country that knows that happened, they'd be incinerated. The only possibility of that is if the U.S. attacks. So it becomes it's a defensive in the sense that after we attack, then it protects us from any possible response. So the biggest threat, or a far bigger threat to the U.S. is um, climate breakdown, right? Uh, Obviously, you know, um, different forms of pollution. Uh, right? You even get into a transport system designed around the private car rather than safer forms of transport. I mean, it goes on and on. You can go down the list. Lack of, inequality in and of itself is a very deadly thing so it goes on and on and on. It's just it's a further commitment of social resources to precisely what we don't need, and even more so in the US than here, but very much the case in Canada as well.
Go ahead, Yuri.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Eve. Always great. By the way, I really do like that shirt, and I almost thought it was the logo for Artists for Peace. And you have to tell me where you got your two Palestinian scarves. I need to get the link for that. But I wanted to, well, actually, an interesting thing you were mentioning about, Jenny Kwan, who's a real, who's a really like Hong Kong like nationalist. There is a very short article in the CBC. The title was 30 MPs accepted 23 OK dollars, Canadian dollars, in free travel last year, mostly for trips to Taiwan. So I think unfortunately we're still going to see a lot of pivot to Asia nonsense and a lot of stuff that's going to be propping up, like, Taiwan independence, Hong Kong stuff. And yeah, I also wanted to, just like comment, regarding Avi Lewis's thing about like his dad. I mean, like, I also agree, like, like credit where credit is due. If somebody who did have very like, like reactionary policies has sort of disavowed them, then okay, we should then okay, that's good. But I also think, like, uh let's not whitewash both his dad and his granddad were like, we're those typical like NTPers that always like kneecapped the base of the party, kicking out the waffle, and both and there's this whole nonsense of progressive on everything except Palestine. But I like to say that there are people who are regressive on everything, especially Palestine. So yeah, and I just think like it's stupid, this whole thing that like, oh, I was a supporter of Zionism for many years because I heard some bigoted comments about Jews at UN cocktail parties. But now that Israel has gone completely off the rails, like now I disavow them. So I think that's just kind of like, I don't know, nonsense. And then lastly, can you just explain again furthermore, what was the squabble with Martin Lukash, and I still don't see like what exactly is the problem with calling out Zionism as a Jewish supremacist ideology, and calling out Jewish Zionist communities as upholding a bigoted ideology, which is Zionism, which is Jewish supremacism. We've been having a bit of a debate about that in the chat, so please, if you want, like,
Well,
further comments and like
I think
clarify.
to me it's straightforward that Zionism is Jewish supremacy. Is it a form? Is it Jewish supremacy that comes out of and alongside European settler colonialism? For sure, no doubt about it. It's not just a so sort of a form of like uh, colonial Jewish supremacy that is uh, directly linked to obviously the British Empire, but more broadly European colonial ideologies. In the here and now, it is Jewish supremacy. I mean, that's how it functions, in literally at the level of like, if you have a Jewish mother, you can go to, right? Like, it's just, so It's not white supremacy in the functional sense of that, in that obviously white people can't just become Israeli citizens, and its laws are not structured around uh, benefiting white people. I mean, there's Ashkenazi Jews Sephardic Jews or whatever that have the same uh, uh, special status, even if they are of Arab background. Uh, so yeah, like I mean that just self like I don't know how you can argue against that. It just it's and like I know Martin Lucas is someone not many years ago was literally arguing that straight up, like don't call it Jewish supremacy. The only reason to do that is it's about protecting the the Jewish community. That was how, that's how he would, whether admits it or not, that's what that's coming from. That's the whole term of you want to exculpate, right? It's all over. We see it all over. And so I completely reject it. I've rejected it for, I changed my mind on this issue in 2014, right? The power question on this, so this the simplicity of where the source of the power and how what the what drives pro-Israelism. I haven't changed it completely. I still believe the U.S. empire and imperial politics and geopolitics are essentially important to understand it. And there are other elements like, European settler solidarity. There's a Christian Zionist element. There are other elements. It's just anti-Muslim kind of dynamic. There's arms industry. There's all kinds of other factors going into understanding it. But the level of commitment of the Jewish community writ large, right? Institutionally, it's almost unanimity, right? Individually, that's not the case. Many, 10, 20, 30, I don't know what percent of Canadian Jews are not on board, everything from anti-Zionist to just somewhat critical. Institutionally, it's near unanimity. Even after all this horrors, it's still near unanimity among Jewish institutions. And and then the other side to it is the wealth and organizational structure of the Jewish community. It's vast, right? The overrepresentation in positions of influence and wealth, and then the uniquely well organized institutional structure is there's no equivalent. The Ukrainian Canadian Congress is nothing like, right? It's this ethnic lobby group that has, that I think is effective, but it's just nothing compared to the resources and the structure of the pro-Israel Jewish organizations. So yeah. Now, so the disagreement, I mean, basically, Martin was saying in his thing was just like, you can't talk about that. Don't say that. That's not true. And his proof of the not true was that he said it was not true. Like it wasn't. It was like, okay, well, you can. He was like, well, the Globe Mail's owned by a WASP, and it's pro-Israel, and therefore it's and like, I mean, the argument is much more sophisticated on my side than just, okay, well, there's one owner of a paper that's pro-Israel that's not Jewish, and therefore, come on, like as if that's my argument, right? Like, but so yeah, and I would even take like his example and how he does that is he kind of like speaks to it, right? Like if someone was to just say, it's that paper is owned by a Jew, and he's totally comfortable with it. Oh, it's owned by a WASP, and right, and like if you do it the other way around, it would become whoa, 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 and that's part of the sort of protective layer that comes to discussing the role of Jewish Zionist institutions or Jewish Zionist individuals in this stuff, right? There's a protective layer that you can't talk about it because then you're anti-Semitic, and so right, that's part of the power question, and it's so clearly the case when you get into the the Holocaust industry. And that was one of the points I was trying to make in this discussion was that, you know, the when you talk about coverage, media coverage of the Palestine question, like it's not just that they don't, you know, the CBC now, they convey, the CBC conveys the dire situation in Gaza. They do. Like it's not, they don't convey it properly. They don't give the historic context. They don't, you know, say, hey, this is just a colonial power that, yeah, some bad things may have happened from Israelis on October 7th, but it was the colonial power has just been abusing people in Gaza. And then, and then now, you know, okay. So they don't give you all that. I don't want to, you know, but they do give the basic, okay, there's some starvation, there's violence. They convey some of that. Now, simultaneously, like so much of this question is not just the coverage, what's the coverage of that? It's also like the whole hysteria around anti-Semitism, the hysteria around anti-Semitism in the media is anti-Palestinian. And that's an area, like used the example of the Montreal Holocaust Museum. The Montreal Holocaust Museum, which is getting $30 million as part of of direct government money plus tens of millions of dollars indirect government money subsidies for this new museum. It's an aggressively anti-Palestinian institution. It's a genocidal institution. No one, no one in the media would dare criticize the Montreal Holocaust Museum. There's nothing about that. So when we talk about the media's bias, it's like it's a much more encompassing, you know, there's many more facets. It's just like, oh, they're not conveying the fact that you know at least 60,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and there's a starvation policy. That you know that's part of it, but it's also part of they are running cover. The media whole they go along with this whole you know sort of hysteria that's designed to continue the Canadian government supporting the violence in Gaza. And so and there's a anyway, there's you know different facets to it, and understanding that is you know you got to understand all kinds. I mean, is like I said, there's the special envoy on anti-Semitism, there's the IHRA, there's Erwin Kotler going back 40 plus years talking about the new anti-Semitism as a way to protect Israel from criticism. There's a whole institutional, political, ideological, cultural uh, 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 battle going on, and the media is like literally zero. I mean, basically close to zero, maybe with the exception of some of the IHRA, critical coverage of that, how that is anti-Palestinian. Anyways, I don't know if that answered the question.
Okay, so we have two more
Thanks, Steve.
questions. We have two more questions. Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was there yesterday marching behind the folks in Boulder that got the some kind of incendiary, this like giant flame thing came out across the people gathered together to read the names of the hostages and stuff. I've gone along with them for a year. They don't like it that I'm there with my keffiyeh and stuff. But it was interesting because the guy who threw this flame out, it was like it's like he was spraying it. He had on some gear that looked like he was a maintenance doing lawn work, I guess. And it came out as like a linear uh, 20 feet long flame. And then he did another one and got the people on fire, and one's in critical condition, and like 6 or 8 people. But you know what? He got 624 years and $10 million bond. And the guy at King Soopers that killed 12 people, also in Boulder, or 10 people. Was it 10 or 12? Anyway, that guy didn't get near so much, like that kind of bond. And so I don't know quite what this is coming to. Also, I wondered, have you heard about this will go viral soon, I think. It just happened on Sunday, yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Have you heard of it?
What happened in Boulder? Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I also saw somewhere that Greta Thunberg is being threatened with being assassinated?
Yeah.
Like, where's that coming from?
Well, she's on the boat to Gaza, leaving from Italy, or
Flotillar thing.
they've left from Italy, and she's being Lindsey Graham has sort of threatened her, and then that arson. I don't know how I forget his last name, but I have his face
Yeah.
in my head. He frames himself. He's this aggressive online Zionist commentator. I guess he's a lawyer. He has a more explicit threat against her. He met with a whole bunch of Canadian MPs. He was part of the big anti-Semitism forum year, I think late 2023. He came here. He's threatening her. I'm curious. Like that's what I would like to, Oh, I didn't really get into actually. I kind of forgot to talk about the whole thing about the Ottawa, being in Ottawa and seeing these politicians and the ability to like question them. And it's to me, it's just so embarrassing that the left is not doing, doesn't have anybody doing some of the street journalism in Ottawa. So you got like Daisy Media, you got Rebel News doing this, and we don't got anyone doing in Ottawa doing this stuff. And it's just you did it. It's really kind of crazy. Like this was really like this was the buffet for me or whatever. Like I was just standing around and there's like politician after politician coming. I didn't recognize all of them. But anyways, just ask. I want to like go and ask conservative MPs. I bet you could get some conservative MPs right now who would basically say, "Yeah, kill her," like or variations of that. You get these people like this Michael Cooper who would just say, "I'd stand with Israel even if they kill everyone in Gaza." There's these questions like that I think would be very revealing to ask that that should be done in Ottawa. But yes, that's a little bit of a segue. Sorry.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. That was an incredible story, Lynn. We have been hearing about this incident and that the guy who had the flamethrower was that they're charging him with murder even though he didn't kill anybody, which is, I guess, a possibility in Colorado. Um, uh, but I just wanted to say, because last week, I think Nadia said there was a proposal for a nuclear waste dump or site near the Ottawa River. We're in Louisville, a tiny community, which isn't even named as a community. We're usually called River John, Nova Scotia, Northern Nova Scotia, Mi'kma'ki. And it's one of the 3 sites that's been opened for proposals for uranium mining, uranium exploration by the provincial government. And of course, they're meeting, the premiers and Carney have been meeting today, talking about fast tracking projects, infrastructure, and natural resource projects. So they seem to all be on the same bandwagon. And anyway, people are getting really riled up about it, which is wonderful. There's community meetings popping up in different places.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah.
Eve, I just had one last comment. When I read your piece on the Israel rally in Toronto, and that you spoke of the need to diminish sort of the power of Jewish institutions, it was the first time that I actually had fear for your physical safety. The Israelis, they're so adept at assassinating critics abroad and making it look like, I don't know, it was an accident or nobody can figure out how they died. But that was one I thought, well, that's the first time I really actually thought, I wonder how concerned you are, because that was the first thing that came to my mind, is you'd be a target.
Yeah, no, I'm not I'm not that concerned. If it wasn't for having 2 young children, like I actually thought about this quite a bit last months. Like being killed over responding to this, right? Like seeing, I don't want to die, but like the notion of like death being holding me back or some sort of like that is not like having young children that concerns me, but the dis the scope of the horrors that we've seen and the kind of like I would say the the mental anguish that I've gone through in watching this is definitely leads me towards being I don't know, not concerned is not the right word, but yeah, I also think that's like that would be very unstrategic on behalf of pro-Israel forces. I think that those who would have the capacity to pull that off properly would realize that the if things went awry, the toll would be too big to make it make sense. Certainly in Canada. Now, if I was traveling somewhere or whatever, that might be a different story. But yeah. So
Okay, sorry, it's one. Lynn, did you put your hand up again, or was it the same hand? Did you have another question? It'd be the last one if you do. Okay, I'll get you to unmute, please, and this can be our last question.
Yeah, I was just kind of stunned when that the breaking news is happening here. But Eve, I was 15, 20 feet from this flamethrower guy.
oh
Like,
well.
it was right in front of me. Because I march behind them because I support the hostages too. I just I just support that the negotiations should be, either full equality in Israel, I mean in Palestine, and um, and reparations, not split up between Gaza and West Bank. And I have real big plans for that. And then the hostages can be released, of course. So of course I don't like this, but they put numbers on your shirt each week when they march, like 603 days. So I figured out, Eve, um, from November 2nd, 1917, Balfour Declaration, it's 39,000. That's 108 years, 39,264 days or something. So I put that sign on my thing. But I'll wear their sign also. They're just masking tape. But the really radical pro-Israelis weren't there yesterday. And it was real concerning because an acquaintance of mine for 25 years came there for the first time. I didn't even know his sentiments were that. And that was not a good day to go there for the first time. And he's 84 years old. And I think his wife is the one that's critical in the hospital. Um,
Wow.
so it's wild, like right in front of you. Um, but I know, you know what? I see helicopters coming around. I see planes swooping. It scares me when I see the F-16s fly over at like I kind of can feel that. You've been to enough movies to know that there's bombs and they could come down anytime. And with all this rage from coming from Palestine, I mean, and they aren't raging, they're just dying, and the rage is like surrounding them, and it's just this network of horror that makes you realize it could be you anytime. I feel that way anyway. I think a lot of people do, but they don't consciously talk about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn, for sharing that. Eve, did you have anything to add, or we'll head
Oh,
out?
that's a crazy story, but yeah, I mean, it's all very uh you know, the violence is all very bad, right? Violence begets violence, and yeah, I don't know what the out here is because this is I mean, even when the bulk of the violence ends, the rage and the anger is going to last for a long time. I don't know how that all gets processed, but
Okay. Thanks very much, Eve. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
thanks. Take care.